How are you going to cast Laverne Cox as Dr. Cable and not give her at least 12 villain monologues? I'm here. I'm seated. I want to watch her monologue.
The smoke has decided their way of living is more worthy than ours.
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I like to talk about entertainment media. I don't know why I thought that it was weeks ago that I published my video about the Uglies book as a prelude to the film adaptation being released on Netflix. At the time of making this video, it was only 11 days ago. What even is time? If you haven't already watched that video, I do recommend that you start there and then come back to watch this video because I was fairly thorough in going through the first Uglies book and some initial thoughts about adapting that material into a feature film. I'm going to try to hybridize what I did with my coverage of It Ends With Us, where I did a video about the source material and then a video about how the adaptation turned out in comparison, as well as my usual style of opening weekend film reviews where I have a spoiler-free section first and then I go into all of the spoilers afterwards so people can decide how far they would like to proceed. Those sections will be timestamped, but I will also verbally tell you when we will be going into more of those spoilers. And that will be the bulk of the video because there is a lot for me to go over. Watching Uglies was an interesting experience because normally I would have stayed up to watch the film's release, but I had a virtual roundtable junket interview in the morning, so I knew that I had to go to sleep at a reasonable hour to wake up in time for that. So I woke up this morning and I was getting myself ready for that roundtable, but I was also watching Uglies at the same time because this film is only 90 minutes long. If you look it up, it says something closer to 1 hour and 40 minutes, and I do not believe that that's an accurate description because at least 10 minutes of that are those extremely long Netflix credits with all of the added pages for the credits that span the multitude of languages and markets that receive the material around the world. The main point of feedback that I would give to summarize how I feel about this Uglies film is that this should have been 2 hours long. There were alterations to the source material that I thought were good choices, but there were others that I didn't love, and oftentimes my issue came back to the fact that things felt rushed. What good is improving certain details of the source material in the adaptation process only for you to zoom right through them so that we as the audience don't have enough time to sit with these characters, sit in this world, and really marinate in those feelings and nuances? If you haven't read the book and you're watching the film on its own, perhaps those things will not bother you because you don't know what it is that you are missing. But for me, it ended up being a very mixed bag while watching. I would like something, and then I would have an issue with something, and then I would like something once again, and we would just rinse and repeat that cycle. Laverne Cox was the main part I was most looking forward to, and she was fabulous in this, but I also felt like they should have given her more. One of the changes I was expecting them to make was to expand the perspective of the story in the book so that we would get a lot more scenes of what was going on with other characters in different locations beyond just whatever was happening with Tally. The book is very locked in on anything and everything happening from Tally's perspective. If Tally isn't directly seeing or experiencing or thinking something, you are not going to know what's going on. There was a surprisingly minimal amount of material in the film that didn't have Tally there, and it really felt like a missed opportunity to flesh out more of this world and let us connect to more of the characters in the ensemble beyond just Tally. There were some questionable looking visual effects, but that really did not end up being high on my list of issues that I had with the film. My biggest issue, without a doubt, was the fact that it felt rushed and underdeveloped, and the short runtime is a natural thing for me to point towards as a detriment to the film overall. Now, I know my tone right now may seem very negative, but I think it's much easier to share specifics about the good and the bad once we get into spoilers. So if you simply want to know whether or not you should watch the film, I would say that the short runtime probably helps in this regard for anyone who might be on the fence. Even if you don't end up loving the final result, it would take up far less of your time to find out for yourself. When trying to organize my thoughts, I would bounce back and forth between something that I liked and something that I disliked, which is why I ultimately decided to settle on a 3-star rating on my Letterboxd, simply because it's exactly right in the middle.
Will you promise me something? No matter how pretty they make you, just don't let them erase you.
Promise.
Now I am going to go into spoilers for everything that goes on in Uglies on Netflix. And when I say spoilers, I mean we're doing full spoilers for the film, spoilers for the book, as we will be comparing the two. For full context for anyone in the audience, I have only read the first book in the Uglies series to make that video in the lead up to this film's release, so that will be what I compare this to. I will not be saying much in the way of things that develop across the entire book series, but if you are someone that has read those books and you would like to share more of that context, please feel free to do so in the comments, because I do not foresee see myself having the time to go and read the other books because I doubt that they're going to continue on with this series on Netflix and make more films. If they defy my expectations and decide to greenlight the next book, I will of course consider reading that for the sake of making a video on it. But films take a while to get through the full cycle of production, so a video like that would not be a priority on my video to-do list for quite some time anyway. The Uglies film begins with an opening voiceover narration from Tally explaining what Rusties are, claiming that the white tiger orchids were engineered to be a truly renewable energy source. The backstory is already coming across as a bit different because in the book, Tally learns from David that there was a parasite that made petroleum explode when it would come into contact with oxygen, and then when it would burn, the spores would spread in the smoke. So that was the thing that caused the world that resembles the one the audience lives in to fall. They never say whether or not that happened in the film, so I suppose maybe it could still be true, but it's never outright clarified if this is still the same in the adaptation. She eventually finds out that the story about the flowers, though, is a lie. We also get to see Paris with Tally before he has his surgery, which is different from the book because in the book, you meet Tally when Paris has already had his surgery to become pretty, and you only know what their relationship used to be when she thinks about those memories. An opening narration is an adequate way to explain this new world. I don't mind that they went with this choice. There are some situations in filmmaking where I would be more inclined to be very annoyed when people are telling instead of showing, but I think that for a Netflix original film, people do tend to be less patient. Even myself, I'm inclined to click out of things if they don't keep me engaged, whereas when I go to the cinema to see a film, I'm already there. I'm going to sit and watch and experience the full picture of whatever it is that I got my ticket for. Tally explains what Uglies are and the fact that everyone gets the surgery at age 16. She hangs out with Paris, who is set to have his surgery the next day, and immediately I was struck by the vibes that were present between these two. I don't know if Tally and Paris have anything romantic further into this book series, but in book 1, I never got the impression that these two were anything other than best friends. But in the film, this very first scene we watch of the two of them talking about their friendship and getting these surgeries, it really felt like there was this strong subtext, this undercurrent that they're harboring non-platonic feelings for one another. Paris tells Tally to stay out of trouble, so she will be able to get her surgery and join him in a couple of months when she will also turn 16 and be able to get that pretty surgery. They have their matching hand scars, and we also get to see a flashback of them meeting one another for the first time, Paris having an accident that caused the hand scar on his palm, and Tally proceeding to cut her own hand so that she would match him, and they make a promise to one another to be best friends forever. Paris tells Tally to meet him at the bridge in 1 month so that he will be able to fill her in on how things are after his surgery has happened, and they will be able to catch up. But when we get to that 1 month mark, Paris is not at the bridge, and he also has not been responding to Tally's text messages or whatever the future version of text messages are called. So Tally goes and sneaks over to New Pretty Town to try to find Paris, and instead of going out of her way to steal a pig mask, someone just happens to throw one and she happens to catch it. She puts the mask on, and this mask actually generates a whole new outfit onto her body while she is wearing that mask. And a small detail I enjoyed because I love a good soundtrack choice, there was this really eerie cover of the Postal Service's Such Great Heights playing during this part of the film where Tally gets into New Pretty Town to look for Paris. It added this very unsettling flavor to the visit, and I really wish that they had leaned into that even harder. I understand that at this point in the story, Tally likes New Pretty Town and it's dazzling. She wants to be here. She wants to be made pretty, but I would have liked for there to be a bit more work done to communicate to the audience that something's not entirely right, especially for the general audience that has not read the book. You would have been able to instill that sense of foreboding and plant a question in the audience's mind of what is really going on here, and that would in turn get the viewer more invested. Tally eventually finds Paris, and he has had his pretty makeover, complete with a new nose, new hair, a new wardrobe, and most significant of all, his hand scar is gone. And the way that they talk about that, it's almost as if he has chosen to have it removed, that he was no longer attached to having it. If I'm remembering correctly though, in the book, I don't think the removal of the scar was ever optional. The surgery includes you getting new skin. Maybe some details were optional for the Uglies in the book, but something like a scar, I don't think that would be kept once you get your surgery. I'm honing in on this idea that the film plays with the notion that Paris has chosen to have the scar removed, because it seems to play into this larger vision they have for Paris as a character within this narrative. There's a lot more conflict for him as a character. His presence is more significant in this film than it was in the first book. I've received some comments that say that Paris joined Special Circumstances in other books books that followed, but I'm merely doing this comparison between the first book and this film, so I would classify this as a change to the material. I know that there has been a fair bit of discourse about how the film approaches making these changes to people's appearances after having had their surgery, and I personally don't mind it. It's really not high on my list of talking points about what I would have liked to change to better enhance the execution of this adaptation. The fact that the pretties have this almost uncanny valley skin filter on them, I think it matches what teenagers today have to deal with by having social media apps with Facetune and other ways to digitally alter one's appearance. See, I try to alter my appearance the old-fashioned way. Weekly BHA and retinol in my skincare routine, SPF daily, and contouring and strip lashes when I'm filming my videos. Tally has to escape because she's detected as an intruder, so she runs off, finds the bungee suits, and makes her escape. That's a change because in the book, Paris tells her to go up to the roof and use the bungee suits to escape, but in the film, they were already on the roof, and he didn't tell her about the suits, she just happened to find them. While escaping and trying to make her way back to Ugly Town, she encounters Shay, who helps her to get away from the warden that is chasing her, and they get away using Shay's hoverboard. Commence that friendship and Tally learning how to ride. Shay lets Tally borrow a book, which is not a common thing for people to have. Everything is technological. People read on tablets, so actual books printed on paper are a rare thing to find, and it's a Henry David Thoreau book if you wanted to know those specifics. Further into the film, you find out that that book belongs to David's parents, Az and Maddie, and it's in their home on their bookshelf. We'll fast forward to the night before their surgery since Tally and Shay have the same birthday, and this is when Shay offers to show Tally the rusty ruins, and while there, this is when Shay reveals that the smoke is real, David is real, that she was supposed to run away with some of her other friends that night, that she had met Tally for the first time, but Shay had gotten scared and didn't end up going with them. Shay reiterates to Tally that she doesn't want to have the surgery and assimilate into the way of life that they are supposed to live in New Pretty Town. But of course, Tally doesn't want to go because she's still very much drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. She believes in the pretty way of life. She has never really had those core beliefs challenged, nor has she interrogated those beliefs on a deeper philosophical level that could lead her to the conclusion that this way of life is trash. So Shay leaves Tally with some instructions for her to follow if she decides that she has changed her mind. Surgery day for Tally, and one by one, everyone else gets to go in and get done except for her. Instead, she's taken to special circumstances and meets Dr. Cable in person. Now, before this, we have seen Dr. Cable as a giant hologram addressing the residents of Ugly Town, but she's not actually there in person. I want to pause my journey through the film's plot, though, to reiterate that I was really looking forward to seeing Laverne Cox play Dr. Cable, and it was fun to see her in this role, but I also simultaneously feel strongly that they did not use her enough. I wanted to see a bunch of villain monologues, and I wanted to watch a lot more of her scheming, her diabolical ongoings, and I think the stakes of the story would have felt far more significant if you gave us more time with Laverne when she is up to no good. So Dr. Cable informs Tally that Shay has gone missing and she needs to help special circumstances find her, find the smoke, find David, all of these things, or else Tally will not get to have her surgery. And we get an extra detail, a change from the source material that I really liked, which was that Dr. Cable tells Tally a lie, which is that the smoke are developing a weapon to attack the city and destroy their way of life. Now, when I heard that, I sat up and went, oh, hold on. What in the Colin Powell lying about WMDs is this? Now, this detail might seem small, but when you think about the subtext of this and relate that back to real world examples, of which there are many, it's not just the WMDs thing, the Naira testimony, hello, anyone, Bueller, that was a great way to enrich the deeper commentary of this story, especially once they get to the reveal about the brain lesions. But I feel like they didn't do enough with this detail. It was a great start, but they could have gone even farther with this. When Tally gets to the smoke, she does look around to try to find a weapon and finds nothing, of course, but I feel like these pieces and how they connect to one another would have been significantly more impactful if we got to watch more of what is going on inside special circumstances. I wasn't saying all of that just because of my own personal desire to indulge in watching Laverne Cox be a baddie. It's something that could have benefited the story as a whole. Anyway, Tally goes back to her dorm and is visited by Paris, and his demeanor is much more pleasant than the last time they met in New Pretty Town, where he was more cold and distant. And I know I keep alternating between going through the events of the story sequentially and jumping back to give broader feedback, but it really is the only way I can think to organize my feedback feedback of this film. So when Paris visited Tally in the book after she was denied her surgery, I felt as though he was still being a lot more aloof in how he interacted with her, which I didn't necessarily mind in the grand scheme of things because we eventually learn that the surgery causes brain lesions which change your behavior and how you think. Oh, and another detail, Tally's parents are almost non-existent in the film. They don't come and see her after she doesn't get her surgery the way that they do in the book. You see them in her one flashback she has of coming to Ugly Town for the first time and meeting Paris, and they have that Stepfordian eeriness about them, and they're fairly aloof and distant, but there's really not much there to make them feel significant to the viewer, especially the viewers who have not read the book. So Tally ends up going on her journey to try to find the smoke after seeing Paris. She follows Shay's instructions, and just as I thought that they would, the film zooms through that. It's much more like a montage. I never thought that they were going to waste screen time on having the long, drawn-out, lonely journey of Tally trying to figure out these clues and painstakingly making her way through day after day of trying to reach the smoke. But here is where we finally get something that made me perk up once again. The first time I perked up was when they had Dr. Cable lie about the smoke developing a weapon. The second time was when they cut away from Tally on her journey. She has just gone to sleep in the field of white tiger orchids, those scientifically engineered flowers. So we cut away from that to a scene in Dr. Cable's office where she is speaking to whomst? Paris. And before the scene had even started and really gotten into things, I was excited because this is what I wanted from the film. I wanted to see what was going on back in New Pretty Town while Tally is away on her journey. I wanted the scope to expand beyond Tally's POV, which we are trapped in for the book, to be able to see what else is going on in this world. Dr. Cable thanks Paris for helping to convince Tally, and Paris says that it felt good seeing Tally again, and that seeing her made him start to feel like how he was before his surgery, and that it felt good. And I was shocked. I was going, are we just going full Charlie's Angels full throttle with the Tally-Paris romance? The book was very clear with the main romance being between Tally and David, but by this point in the film, we are more or less halfway through this teeny tiny why is this so short film, and every bit of romantic subtext has been between Tally and Paris. Tally has not even met David yet. I've also never watched Outer Banks. I don't even know that show's premise, so I do not have a preconceived bias to favor Chase Stokes when watching this. Reading the book, I was perfectly fine with going along with Tally and David's romance, but the film was not doing anything yet to try to even put me on that team when we are already halfway through the film and those two have not met yet. But Dr. Cable, see, this is when we get to see more of that supervillain energy that I wanted, because the instant she sees that this boy is very obviously in love with his bestie Tally, she ups the manipulation and she offers to give Paris the chance to be one of the select few to go on a brand new path, a path that promises real clarity of thought. Paris, we can make you very special. So we put Paris back in the surgery pod to get another round because, of course, as the promotional images had already revealed, Paris is going to become a member of what? Special Circumstances. So cut back to Tally in the orchid field, and she wakes up to everything being on fire, but she is found by whomst? David. About freaking time these two met, he scans her and finds the tracker on her board. He throws that away from them in the field, and the damage to that tracker alerts Dr. Cable, who then sends a couple of specials to go search that location. David's scanner does not detect the tracker in her necklace because the tracker does not fully wake up and become detectable like that unless Tally does her eye scan to turn it on, or unbeknownst to her, but already known to book readers, if her necklace tracker is damaged, it will also do what? Alert Special Circumstances. One of the changes we're seeing here is they removed the rangers. In the book, Tally is rescued from the fire by rangers. They're the ones that fly in helicopters and shoot fire to burn the orchids because they are an invasive species. I don't mind them removing the rangers in this adaptation though, because even if you had extended things to 2 hours, time is limited, it's a large ensemble of characters, and it would be far better to use that limited screen time on characters that have a more significant role to play in the narrative. David brings Tally to where some of the others are, and she's reunited with Shay. She meets Croy, and they go up in a helicopter they have refitted with solar pads to use to burn orchids. And this is Tally's first time learning that those flowers are not a good thing, and they destroy the environment by sucking up all the nutrients from the ground and force people to relocate and live in the cities and follow that way of life. Shay accidentally falls out of the helicopter, down below to the ground, and Tally throws a rope down and jumps after her, so she grabs onto Shay so that they can hold onto the rope attached to the helicopter and they can get airlifted out, but it is a close encounter with those two special circumstance pretties that are trying to grab a hold of those girls. David is very impressed by Tally's antics, but Croy is skeptical of her. Just like in the book, Croy is the #1 Tally anti. He suspects that she's up to no good. And I hate to say this, I really do, but I feel like Croy was a more compelling, believable figure in the film than David was when we look at who's in the smoke. The short runtime was a real disservice to the part of the story that happens in the smoke. I feel like you have barely any time to experience the smoke and fall in love with that place the way that you need to in order to get invested in it. And it's also to the detriment of David as a character. David was not given the time or space or material to be a believable leader of the smoke. He's such an important character in the story, and Tally falling in love with the smoke works in tandem with her blossoming feelings for David, and I just did not feel the connection between them the way that I needed to. And that was really disappointing because anytime I would look at David, he was adorable, but they did not give him the necessary material or present him with Tally as something believably romantic. I'm not going to tell you why it didn't work because it could be coming from a number of factors. Were there more believable takes that they filmed that you could have used instead to make me feel that spark between them? Maybe. I would have no way of knowing something like that. But even the moments where David tells Tally that she's beautiful, those are such impactful parts of the book, but they just fell flat in the film. You didn't linger in that space long enough. The delivery of the lines wasn't believable. It was just a whole multitude of issues. I'm telling you, if I had watched this film without reading the book, I would have thought that Tally and Paris were endgame and they were trying to do this whole dramatic arc for the two of them, because there was far more emotionally resonant material for them as a duo than there was for Tally and David. I did, however, like the fact that they removed the weird love triangle vibe from the book where Shay and Tally start to have some hostility in their relationship because Shay is interested in David, but once Tally arrives, he only has eyes for her. In the film, the tension between Shay and Tally comes from the fact that Tally more or less immediately reveals to Shay in private after arriving that she is worried about Shay and wants to bring her back. Shay agrees to keep Tally's hesitance a secret on the condition that she gives this place, the smoke, a real chance, which Tally does, and of course she comes to realize that the smoke is the place to be at and their way of life is superior. Once Tally asks David if they have a weapon at the smoke, this is what spurs him to bring Tally to his parents, and they tell her the truth about the brain lesions that are caused by the pretty surgery as a means of controlling people, and that Az and Maddie used to be surgeons before they learned the truth about everything and ran away from the city. One change they made that I appreciated because it was a way to more efficiently consolidate the widespread developments in the book story is that Maddie was already working on the cure. In the book, she has to create the cure after Tally and David rescue everyone from captivity at the Special Circumstances facility, but in the film, she's already been working on it, so she only needs 1 or 2 other bits for it to be ready to test on human subjects. Anyway, Tally throws her necklace in the fire after she learns the truth about the surgery, the brain lesions, all of that. She and David kiss, and the following morning, just like in the book, Special Circumstances have arrived. Before we get into that drama though, I just want to point out that I'm so disappointed that they didn't have the library at the smoke. In the book, the smoke has a library and an older man who is the librarian, and he looks after these precious artifacts, which are magazines from centuries ago that they keep wrapped in plastic, and these are such a crucial part of the world building, and they enrich the commentary and the emotional devastation of Special Circumstances showing up and destroying the library. Although thankfully in the book, the librarian had already snuck out a bunch of these magazines in their plastic covers, safely stowed away in a duffel bag. If you are only watching this video without watching my other video about Uglies, I again would really recommend that you watch that first because I explained a lot of these plot details in that video. But one change that I do prefer is that we see David's father Az die in the film. In the book, he dies off screen, so to speak, since it happened away from Tally, so she did not see it happen, and therefore neither would we as the reader. It just felt significantly more impactful to see that loss mess and feel it as a result if we see special circumstances take him out instead of simply finding out, oh yeah, they did an experimental surgery and it failed, so he's dead now. And not only that, they up the drama of this because Paris is on the ground for this operation because he's been further enhanced to become a member of special circumstances, so he's a soldier now. And Dr. Cable is messy. She orders Paris to take Az out, so Paris snaps his neck in front of everyone. And Tally and David, they were hiding while watching this, but then they come running out of hiding because they're so devastated and horrified at what Paris has just done to Az. And when Tally is upset about what's happened, she looks at Paris and he looks at her. He does this fluttering blinking and he looks really conflicted, and I went, okay, Chase Stokes, I wasn't familiar with your game. He was serving acting. Honestly, his performance was one of the most interesting parts of this film, and that's not what I was expecting to be my takeaway from watching it. He was definitely my favorite performance among the younger characters that are supposed to be in the teenage age range. Croy and Shay would probably be my joint second place, and then for the adult characters, Laverne Cox, she had a couple of moments where I was just really having fun watching her when they actually gave her fun things to do. Even just the small details of how she would stand this pristine supervillain posture, I just love choices like those. In the commotion, Tally is revealed to have been in cahoots with Dr. Cable, and the people of the smoke who are all being held captive and witness this reveal, they are audibly reacting, they are horrified, they are outraged. I will admit I kind of like the drama of this reveal though. It was giving daytime television chat show where the audience is yelling. Tally runs off to set off an explosion and steal a hoverboard and make her escape. During the commotion, Maddie slips a vial into David's bag and pushes him to also escape, but everyone else ends up being taken captive and brought back to the city. Tally reconvenes with David in the cave where supplies are kept, and he's understandably upset by her betrayal, but he begrudgingly accepts that he needs to stick with her for the time being in the journey back to the city because he's never been there before. She's from there. She's been inside the special circumstances facility. And again, this is an example of why it was a mistake to cut the runtime down as much as they did, because they just immediately cut to the two of them being back in the city to do their rescue operation. They don't address the emotional fallout whatsoever of Tally's betrayal. These two are meant to be the main romantic pairing of this book, and he just found out this huge secret that has destroyed his home, which she in a way was partially responsible for. Yes, she didn't know that throwing the necklace in the fire would signal them to roll up, but the journey from the smoke back to the city when you don't have those giant special circumstances ships to fly in, that journey takes days. And it really felt like I blinked and now we're just immediately doing more action. Even the planning of how to get inside the facility, it just felt rushed. It felt like you were speed running to wrap this movie up. So they recruit some teens that we had met earlier in the film to do the diversion of having "The Smoke Lives" written in the sky. Then Tally and David bungee jacket into special circumstances. They fight the guards, they open the doors to let the captives out, and Tally rallies the main group of characters to try to rescue Shay, but once they find her, they discover that she's already had her surgery and she is now pretty. Paris arrives, as does Dr. Cable, who orders Tally, David, and Maddie to get inside the surgery tubes so they can get made pretty. And this was a huge sore spot for me because you just cannot do this. The surgeries happen to people who have been scanned numerous times. You need a lot of data for the machine to know what your face and body are, what modifications are going to be made in this surgery. David has never been in the city. He has never been scanned. The machine would not know what to do with him. And if anyone tries to suggest, well, maybe that's just a change they made from the book to the screen in the lore, no. I disagree, because earlier in the film, we see Tally being scanned and the machine says, commencing scan 196. So even if you weren't super explicit with explaining this to a general viewing audience, it's clearly a detail you pulled from the source material and then you failed to follow through on that. You could put Tally and Maddie in the surgery pods and just have another special circumstances soldier physically restrain David, but David should not be in one of these tubes. However, we're not going to linger on this terrible decision in the adaptation because Croy is now going to pull up in a helicopter being flown by someone else on Team Smoke, and Croy proceeds to shoot fire into the room, destroying the surgery pods and freeing the trio that is being held captive within them. Now, if you think about this too hard, you might go, well, that was kind of risky. You could have barbecued your friends. Listen, desperate times call for desperate measures. It is the third act when we will unleash big action sequences, and I love a stunt queen, which clearly movie Croy is. So I'm fine with this. He was more entertaining in this movie than David was. Also, right before he starts shooting fire, they do this close-up on Dr. Cable, and Laverne, she is so funny. She scoffs. Oh, where are her awards? To me, she is an icon. Tally, David, Maddie, and Shay run outside, but they see Paris standing off and looking at them. So David is very concerned about this, but Tally implores him to just let her go talk to him. So Tally goes up to Paris and she points out that his hand is injured. He looks and there is a piece of glass stuck in his palm. He pulls that out and it now has recreated a hand scar like the one that he had before his pretty surgeries. This moment had real emotional tension. You feel the weight of their history and the connection that's actually been effectively established and conveyed in this film, unlike the Tally-David romance that was supposed to be the main couple of this story. And again, Chase Stokes is the one actor playing a teenage character that is bringing an interesting dynamic performance where so much is restrained, but you see the remnants of who he used to be simmering beneath the surface, threatening to explode out. Tally implores Paris to remember that they promised to be best friends forever, and when he reaches forward to cradle her cheek, David is watching, and from behind it looks like Tally is about to be grabbed, and he remembers how Paris grabbed David's father Az and snapped his neck. So David panics, he runs up and starts swinging, but naturally David is no match for a genetically super modified special circumstances pretty, so he's losing. Until Tally tackles Paris, and Paris gets knocked off of David, and he is knocked off all the way to where he's dangling off the edge of a building, which is on top of a waterfall, and Tally calls out to him using his old nickname, Nose, and he responds with her nickname, Squint, before falling dramatically. Now, they don't show this, but obviously he's supposed to survive. It's a waterfall. And those other specials that we saw earlier, they were running through fire. If you think Paris can't handle a waterfall, don't be ridiculous. He'll be fine. Just let him have a nap and he'll be up and ready for round 2, which we will never see because I am highly skeptical that Netflix will move ahead with a sequel. Now, again, if I'm proven wrong, fair enough, but at this point, I just don't trust Netflix to do sequels or renewals. Nowadays, it's increasingly rare that they continue with things, regardless of whether or not the audience is asking to see more story. So Maddie had stolen a vial from Dr. Cable's lab, and this vial contains what she will need to fully finish making her cure that she's been trying to make for these brain lesions. Shay does not consent to be the test subject, so Tally volunteers to be turned pretty and be the test subject that they will need. This is very similar to the book, the difference being that in the book, David did not find out about Tally's betrayal until after Tally is trying to convince him that she should be this test subject, but in the film, he already knows that. Tally promises that she will still be herself after the surgery and that she will leave him a sign so that he will know with certainty that she is in fact still herself. The group escapes while Tally stays with Shay to be snatched up by the warden, and Tally says more or less her final line from the book of identifying herself and requesting to be made pretty. However, the film goes one step further by showing Tally after her surgery. She now has the gold hair and gold eyes that she had said that she wanted earlier on in the film, but the wink and the nod to the audience comes in the form of a reveal that she still has her hand scar. So there's this sense of ambiguity because the way that she's speaking and behaving has transformed. I feel like my feedback came across a lot more negative than I actually feel about this film adaptation. I will fully acknowledge that there were many alterations to the material that I agreed with. Removing the range that makes sense. Making Paris a special, good to do that now. That detail I spoke about before, where Dr. Cable lies about the smoke having a weapon. Very interesting and thematically rich change to the material. I haven't looked into any details about production, which decisions came from where, so I'm not going to point fingers at who is responsible for the things that I disagreed with. Number 1 on the list being a 90-minute runtime when multiple characters, relationships, storylines, and world-building details would have benefited from further exploration. It's too early for me to tell what the larger audience's reaction is to this film, but personally, I'm of the belief that if there are a lot of people watching and asking for a sequel, you should make one. I would tune in just to see Laverne Cox continue to be fierce, and much to my surprise, I would actually really like to see more of Paris. That is not the reaction I thought I would have when watching this film for the first time, but that boy was out here serving acting, nuance, layers. I didn't find him interesting in the book, but in this adaptation, he stole the show. Sorry.
What are you doing here?
I was worried.
Things are just different here. You'll get it when you're pretty.